So our son Oakley, when he was little, he was constantly picked on at school. So of course he felt nervous in the morning before he had to head into school.
Sure.
Plus the kid had dyslexia and ADHD, all of which was not diagnosed. So he's heading into a full day in a classroom where he physiologically, neurologically is incapable of doing what is going to be asked of him. And so his body, before entering that situation, sounds an alarm.
Totally.
And when the alarm sounds and the physiological changes happen, guess what physiological feeling he has? His stomach starts to rumble because as the physiology of the alarm changes and the chemistry in his digestive tract changes, he starts getting butterflies that feel like pterodactyls. And then all of a sudden, instead of just giving himself a hug and going, it's going to be okay. Today's going to be an okay day. I can face this. Instead of reassuring himself, he goes into his head and says, oh my God, my stomach, I think I'm going to puke. I can't go to school. Holy, and he ramps himself. We were dealing with panic attacks with this kid where he would literally bang his head on the kitchen island. I don't want to go to school, crying. He would force himself to throw. He would get so worked up, he would actually throw up. I mean, it was horrible. And I now can see that all of the interventions that were being done with this kid with therapists, which were all about just change the channel upstairs.
Right.
And then he would turn to them and say, but sometimes when I change the channel, it takes me to a channel I don't want to watch. So what if I change the channel of my thoughts and I get another bad thought? Like even he was reacting against it, but nobody taught us that what the kid needed was a hug, validation, reassurance in that moment physically to get the alarm to quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, you nailed it. So, I think that's part of it is that, especially with kids, especially with children, it's so important that they feel you, that they feel seen, heard, and loved. Touch is such a valuable thing with kids. It's just so amazing. My wife, Cynthia, is a somatic trauma therapist. She deals mostly with people that have pre-verbal trauma before the age of 7 years old. So they don't have a story about it, right?
Wow. How do they know they have trauma before the age of 7?
Because they feel it in their body. Because they feel alarmed every day and they don't know why. Because they haven't encoded it to a point where they can... See, the amygdala never forgets. The amygdala encodes everything. Birth trauma, everything. It encodes everything. But we don't have the retrieval mechanism to pull it back up. So we think we have no childhood memories, which is a bit of a semantic thing because we do have childhood memories. We just can't retrieve them. That's the problem. And there's a whole reason for that I put on Instagram about how the hippocampus gets paralyzed. But I don't want to get too much into that. But basically, with Oakley, like it's getting him into his body, into a safe place. So you practice with him, this is what I do with, I know he's older now, but this is what I do with parents is put your hand on your child's heart, then put your other hand on their back about the same level as your front hand, and just sit there with them and just allow their nervous system to regulate and just allow them to feel it and create this safe place in your body. Because this is the next place I'd like to go with this little interview that we're doing.
Yeah.
Is finding us, like people say, oh, I don't want to go to my body. It's like, I understand that. So how can we do that? Well, we find a place in our body that's either safe. With me, it's my breath around my nose because I used to do a lot of meditation. And then what we do is we feel the alarm and then we go into this safe place. And then we go back into the alarm.
Okay, so hold on. Let's walk through this. So you just reached up, and for those of you listening, we put uncut episodes of our podcast in long form up on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mel Robbins. You'll be able to watch him do this. But he just put his hands kind of kind of like if you wore a pair of glasses, you'd put your hands kind of under where your glasses are along your cheeks. And so when you said the way that you could practice this. So here's a takeaway for how you could practice this. You just got what I would call the love sandwich, hands on the heart, hands on the back,
sure.
And just hold somebody when they are having an alarm go off in their body until you can feel them slowly start to have the alarm turn off, and the clinical word being their nervous system starts to regulate again. They're in their body, they're in their safe space. But you also talked about this second tool where you locate a safe place in your body. And for you, it was sort of right here alongside your nose. I was trying to think of another one other than the heart. Like there have been times where I've like kind of tucked my hands under my armpits. It's almost like a mini hug. Almost like, I don't know what it is, that like, I suppose that it's, or like I could put my arms, I could give myself a hug kind of thing. But so you could pick anywhere in your body, your stomach, for some people, like deep breathing. What are some other places that patients of yours have selected in the past to give people
it's
an
all
idea?
over. It's all, but basically I get them, where's a safe place in your body? And a lot of them will say, I don't feel safe. And I'll say, well, where's a neutral place? It's like, well, my right knee feels like there's no feeling in my right knee. It's like, okay, let's go into this pain of your heart, from this recent breakup that you've gone through. Now let's go and just bring our attention into that right knee. And then go back into this. I'm doing this quite a bit faster than I normally.
But when you say bring your attention to your right knee, if I'm doing this exercise with you, does that mean that I've got kind of my eyes closed and I'm mentally working my way down to my knee? So you're mentally kind of locating your attention at your knee. Okay, got it.
Yeah, because that feels either safe or neutral, right?
Yep.
So what we're doing is we're basically training your unconscious mind that this pain that you're feeling in your heart is not all of you. Because what'll happen is the amygdala has no sense of time. So when you get triggered, you will go back, you will turn into that 11-year-old. And then basically what we need to do is train your amygdala like, no, I'm not back there. I'm not 11 years old anymore. I'm actually my age that I am now. You go into that, right knee that's neutral. Or if there's, for me, I go into the sinuses, right? So when I get alarm, I wake up with alarm every day, right? But I don't give it that much credibility anymore. And then I go into this place in my sinuses.
Do you actually touch it or do you just feel it?
I touch it. Yeah, I touch it. And I can do it a little bit now. I might get a little zony when I do this, but basically, and what I do is I can locate the alarm in my solar plexus. I talk about this in the book.
Where are the solar plexus?
Oh, it's right where your ribs meet, right where the bottom part of the sternum.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So that's where I have my alarm from growing up with my schizophrenic dad. So I will go into that alarm. I will try and intentionally give it love and attention. And then I will go up into my sinus area that feels safe. And then I will go back into that place that feels uncomfortable. So the thing is, there's a theory that says when you experience a trauma as a child, part of you stays locked at that age for the rest of your life. Part of you, right? So what I'm
At
trying to
times
do,
I feel like all of me.
yeah, and it can be very overwhelming because it's unconscious, Mel. Like it's not something that we consciously feel. We actually get transported through the amygdala to that time and through the insula. The insula is kind of like the place in our brain that kind of translates the body into the mind and the mind into the body. It's kind of like the way station. So I believe that we actually create this body memory, and I think the insula has something to do with this. And then we feel exactly the same way in our bodies now as we did when the trauma was occurring, which of course brings up all sorts of old memories, all sorts of old panic, and then we want to make
Fears,
sense of that.
stories, all of it. You're right.
So
I want to take another scenario.
Sure.
So I have a really good friend that is in the middle of a massive, like kind of venture capital pitch.
Okay.
And she is doing presentation after presentation to raise a ton of capital for this, super cool thing she's launching. And she is a ball of knots. She has the alarm going off all the time. The stakes feel high. And I realize part of creative energy, part of being successful, part of the kind of motivation that can drive somebody during a very successful time and the adrenaline that shoots through you. Yeah. That's part of what happens when things are high stakes. How do these tools help you be more successful in those moments where you're at bat and this is a big game you're playing, and that kind of adrenaline rush, an alarm in your body is going off all the time. How do you use these tools in those moments?
Well, you practice them first. There's a little thing that I talk to people about all the time. If I said, hey, Mel Robbins, December the 1st, I'm going to take you to the basketball court and I'm going to give you 10 foul shots. And if you make 3 of them, I'm going to give you $5 million. Now, would you start practicing foul shots the day before?
No.
No, you'd start shooting foul shots every day, right? So that's what I mean. It's like, okay, so what I would do with her, the short version is I'd probably find her alarm and work on that first. But what I would do with her is I would say, okay, where is this alarm in your body? I'd find it. Can you put your hand over it? Can you breathe into it? Can you do this? Can you practice this a number of times a day so that when you need it, when you're going into that boardroom, you can do a 2-minute thing in the bathroom where you put your hand over your alarm, you breathe into it, you regulate your body, you relax your shoulders, you relax your jaw, close your eyes, you go into this place that you've practiced a number of times, and then you can come back out in a regulated state.
Now, from a scientific standpoint,
Yep.
from what's going on in your mind, why does this matter?
Well, because you want to be able to train yourself to regulate your own nervous system is basically what it comes down to. And people with anxiety didn't have a parent that regulated their own nervous system, so they have to do it themselves. And nobody's coming to save you. Like, I think I see that with people all the time. No one's coming to save you. Like, you have to do this for yourself. And therapists can help, doctors can help, whatever. But unless you do it for yourself, it's not coming from a place that's really going to dissipate that alarm. And I see this with a lot of people. It's like they have this I think we have this unconscious belief when we have parents that didn't quite meet our needs, that eventually that parent's going to come back.
I keep waiting.
Going to look after us, right? So we don't do it for ourselves. We don't do self-care for ourselves because we assume that parent is going to come back. This isn't conscious. This is all unconscious. We assume that parent's going to come back and take care of us. So why do we have to do it? And I'm sure that's what we said to ourselves at the time. Why do I have to do this? And that's a lot of it, is that you've got to start taking responsibility for your own body, your own alarm, and realize that it's up to you. It's that child in you that wants you back. It wants to connect with you. And if you are pushing it away all the time, that child is either going to shut down and you're going to go into depression, or it's going to go into this fight-flight mode where you're always anxious. And with you, Mel, bringing it back to you, is that this is how you would outrun the anxiety, and every success that you would have would kind of put a little anesthetic on that anxiety.
Well, part of the reason too is that you get a lot of positive attention when you're achieving. And I started marrying achievement with worthiness and being safe and being connected. And
Absolutely.
so when I would be still, there was achievement means that your worth is attached to something outside of you.
Totally.
And whenever I wasn't doing something or going after something or being really busy, I didn't feel worthy. The alarms were going off. One of the other things, I've got a couple like rapid fire things that I want to get in here because I'm addicted to your Instagram account.
Okay.
And you can follow Russ at the Anxiety MD. But one of the couple things that I want to ask you about. Number one, what is the difference between coping with your anxiety and healing it?
Okay. So coping with your anxiety is mostly a top-down thinking process. You learn thinking strategies that help you deal with it. This anxiety isn't real. I'm over-exaggerating, whatever that is. Healing it is going back to that child that's in you, that alarm child in you, and giving them the ability to be seen, heard, and loved by you, by adult you. Now, child you is going to resist that because child you has been ignored by adult you for a very long time. So it takes a while before you start building that bridge back together again. So that's how you heal. You heal by finding that child in you. With you, it's the 11-year-old, that with that sleepover. It's like going back to her, talking to her, sitting beside her and saying, look, that must have been really hard for you. It must have been awful for you. And then see what she says. She may not talk back to you for a month or 2 months or 6 months, but eventually she will. And then when you develop that bridge, that conduit to her, that's when you heal. And you're not just sort of, and the analogy that I draw is that you're in a rowboat, there's a hole in the rowboat, and it's filling up with water. Now you can do cognitive therapies, and I have nothing against cognitive therapies. I think they're helpful, but it's basically like bailing water out of that boat, right? So what you really need to do is go underneath, patch the hole in the hull, which I believe is the old alarm, which is the old wounded version of you as a child. Find that child, show them that they are seen, heard, and loved by you. High five them in the mirror, whatever you need to do. Like, find that child and heal them. And then you heal at the root cause of it. You're not just bailing water by trying to change your thoughts. You're actually getting to the root cause of what's causing your anxiety, which is really a state of alarm.
Yeah, and the inability to understand it. So what is your definition of anxiety, Dr. Kennedy?
Anxiety for me is anxious thoughts of the mind. Anxiety is not painful itself. What's painful is this sense of alarm that's in our body, that's in our system. And it's the alarm that drives the thoughts, because it's a very atypical way, especially as a doctor and a neuroscientist, to look at anxiety as more as a body issue, like old unresolved wounding that just making sense through the mind, because the mind is this compulsive meaning-making, make sense machine. So when it feels the alarm in your body from the old wounds that haven't been resolved, it makes sense of it by worrying, warnings, what ifs, worst case scenarios. And that's what happens.
Let me see if I can unpack that. So for you, you said anxious thoughts, like anxiety is sort of those spiral of thoughts.
Yeah.
But truly, the genesis of it is unresolved trauma or issues from your childhood that is stored in the body?
Typically, yeah.
Okay. Where does anxiety come from?
It comes from that alarm in your body, because typically what happens with people with chronic anxiety is normal. You know, anxiety over taxes, anxiety over your kids, that's normal. But if it's every day, if it's relentless, like that kind of anxiety is abnormal. That typically comes from sort of unresolved stuff from your childhood, and it's stuck in your body and in your mind to some extent. It's a tough call, because when you say anxiety is in your body, of course it's in your nervous system, which of course is your body and your mind. So it's really finding that place of unresolved wounding, that trauma that still sits in you, because that's the engine of what's driving your thoughts. So rather than thinking of anxiety as a thought-based process, it's actually a feeling-based process that's only kind of reflected by the mind. But we assume that it's the mind because we're so fixated on the mind in our society. So it's really a body-based issue, but we focus on the mind and we try and fix it through the mind. And that's why people are in therapy for 30 years and they're not getting a lot better.
That was so succinct what you just said, because what really went thunk for me was when you said anxiety is a feeling issue, but our mind tries to make sense of what we're feeling in our bodies. And we have had this approach forever in the world that we try to change or fix the thoughts in our mind with our mind. And what you're saying, which to me is revolutionary, is no. Let's forget the mind for a minute and let's drop into the body and let's talk about the feelings that are triggering this spiral of thoughts.
Yeah.
Is that a good summary?
That's a great summary.
You know, I've spent the better part of my lifetime living with all of this unrest and unease and on-edgeness in my body. And I have tried for decades to make sense of it, to calm it, to soothe it, to heal it through my mind. And it is a revelation to realize, whoa, it really starts with thinking about the body. And so I want to ask you one more question, and then we're going to kind of jump into the questions for the listeners, which will allow us to go really deep into this topic. If it begins, which I agree with you, with this sort of stored experience in your nervous system, this stored experience and these feelings that get triggered in you, how do you know if what you're experiencing in your life right now is anxiety versus just day-to-day stress versus overwhelm?
I think if it's chronic, like if you're looking at your life, if you wake up in the morning and you're going, oh my God, I've got this, and this, which you've talked about before on the podcast, like waking up with this sense of dread, that's a sign that things aren't quite right. And anxiety is one of those things. I get messages from people all the time that say, I didn't actually know I had anxiety until I read your book. It's like, well, I don't know if I'm doing you any favors as far as that kind of stuff goes. But really, though, I get that all the time because I think that we live in our minds, we live in our bodies. This just becomes normal. And unless it rises above this kind of critical mass where we're like uncomfortable almost all the time, then we think, well, there's something going on. And now with Instagram, with all this stuff, like everything's trauma now. Everything's trauma. And I watched your episode about healing childhood trauma, and I really want to dive into that as well because it's so important. Because the quick version is you probably had trauma as a child that was unresolvable for you as a child. Now, what happens is when we get trauma as children, we blame ourselves. There's a great saying that says if you abuse, neglect, or abandon a child, the child doesn't stop loving the parent, they stop loving themselves. And then that starts the split. And then we start judging, abandoning, blaming, and shaming ourselves from that point forward. And that split causes this sense of alarm that gets lodged in our body. And then because we don't want to feel that alarm in our body, we go up into our heads, which is the only place that a child can go because they're pretty powerless in their environment, and they overthink. And that's a temporary escape. And then we train ourselves as children to overthink because that's the only safe places in our minds. And then when we get older, go through a couple divorces, you get in a car accident, whatever, that stuff tends to come right back up again. So that's really the basis of where this global anxiety kind of comes from in people, is it's this unresolved trauma, and your parents love you and you've got, a supportive family and you're attuned and connected and quote unquote securely attached. You can go through traumas like we all do in childhood, and they won't impact your nervous system to create this permanent change. Or I don't like using the word permanent because it makes it feel like it's hopeless, but it creates a permanent change in your nervous system. And trauma is anything that changes your nervous system, that stucks your nervous system in a pattern that doesn't allow you to get out of that trauma. And then we just get into this loop where there's alarm in our body. We make sense of it by making horrible thoughts in our mind, warnings, what ifs, worst case scenarios, which of course makes the alarm of the body worse, which of course makes the thoughts worse. And we get caught in this alarm anxiety cycle. And unless we see it, we can't get out of it.
Wow. One of the things that I love about you, Dr. Kennedy, is you are the loudest voice out there telling people you can heal anxiety, that you're not stuck feeling this way. You don't have to live your life feeling triggered or out of control or overthinking or on edge. And for somebody that is really struggling with anxiety, that seems impossible. In fact, our first question comes from a woman named Carrie. And it is a question from a woman who is extremely successful. And I'm sure she's hiding her anxiety, but it's gotten to the point where she just can't handle it anymore. So let's take a listen to Carrie.
Hey Mel, I'm a 53-year-old woman, a creative leader with, to the outside world at least, a so-called great career, I guess you'd say, but with crippling anxiety and exhausting overthinking. Traveling, accompanied by panic attacks, what the heck. I've had this issue for 30 years, and all the guided meditations and mindfulness training pods in the world aren't helping. So what steps can I take to stop this, to heal and find a new peace before I chuck in the towel and just barricade myself in at home? Thanks for everything. Bye.
I really relate to Carrie, because I know that I have been somebody with what they call high functioning anxiety for most of my life. That anxiety, a lot of times, lights a fire underneath me. And that worried energy, that nervous energy, that mind that is constantly thinking 15 steps ahead has helped me be very innovative and creative and to take risks in business. But it's torturous because you're just always nervous about something and on edge.
Here's the thing, and this is true with you too, is that the anxiety drives you to succeed. A lot of people with anxiety are really intelligent. So we get very, very good at thinking. We go into our heads. We've been doing it since we've been 5 years old. So of course, it's like going to the thinking gym every day. So we get very good at thinking. We get very good at accomplishing things. The problem is that underlying trauma that I could hear in her voice for sure is driving her too much. And you went through this too. You realized, look, this isn't sustainable going this way. So the solution for her would be to find that little version of herself and see her, love her, protect her, show her that she's connected. And what we do is we find where the alarm is in your body. So with her, I would say, when you get into these anxious phases that I call alarm, and that you brilliantly call alarm all the time. I watched your one on healing childhood trauma, and you only use the term anxiety once or twice, which I just loved. But getting into the alarm in her body, which basically that alarm is a remnant of your younger self. The part of our brain, the amygdala that encodes this, has no sense of time. So that when we encode these traumatic memories, when we recall them, it doesn't feel like they're coming from the past. It feels like they're happening now. So she probably has an unresolved trauma of some kind, or traumas that are coming up in her body. And temporarily, guided meditations, breathing, all that stuff will help you. But the key out of this, and I hope everybody gets this today, if you have chronic anxiety, you have a child in you that is suffering, that is struggling. And all the guided meditations, all the breath work, all the yoga isn't going to heal that. What heals that is actually going in, finding that child, finding their eyes in a picture or even in your mind's eye, looking at them, showing them that they are seen, heard, loved, and protected in a way now that they didn't get back then. And that's how we heal the root cause of this, as opposed to just helping people cope. Because basically, most of the things that are out there today help you cope, and there's nothing wrong with coping. It's just to heal, we have to solve this at the root cause, which is typically this unresolved wounding, typically again from childhood, that's still in you, that's still activated. And until that child feels seen, heard, loved, and protected, you're always going to be anxious.
So, Dr. Kennedy, thank you for going into so much depth just out of the gate here. And I want to hit the pause button so we can hear a word from our sponsors, and so that everybody can just take a breath and digest what we just talked about. Maybe you want to find a photo of your younger self while we're listening to our sponsors. But when we come back, we're going to dig even deeper into Carrie's question. So don't go anywhere. Welcome back. I'm Mel Robbins, and this is the Anxiety Toolkit on the Mel Robbins podcast. So I all of a sudden this visual came to mind, and I want to see if we can maybe tease this out into some specific steps that somebody might be able to take even on their own today with the support of your expertise. Because you described in my mind the 3 layers that somebody has to go through to address this sort of chronic on-edgeness, this stress, this panic attacks that Carrie's talking about. And the first level is self-awareness, right? Mm-hmm. So there may be a large number of people that are listening to this from around the world, because at this point we're reaching 200 countries, 17 million people in 5 months, Dr. Kennedy. And there's a lot of people that are thinking for the first time, I wonder if I have anxiety. And so listening to podcasts, reading books, watching videos, or watching this show on YouTube, and having the self-awareness that maybe this is something called anxiety that you're dealing with. And what are some of the surprising signs, Dr. Kennedy, that people should be looking for that they may not know could actually be anxiety?
Well, one of the big ones that people don't really realize is constantly looking for external validation, constantly looking for love and attention outside of yourself. And when you get it, it's amazing. But when you don't get it, you get into that loneliness phase. And there's a study done, I can't remember how long ago, and I don't remember the exact, but basically it was they took women and they gave them an electric shock, not a big electric shock, and it was voluntary. And then they had 3 scenarios, one where the woman was alone, one where her hand was held by a stranger, and one where her hand was held by her partner. Now, to shorten this up, basically, the brain has to work really, really hard if you're lonely. So when she was alone, 12 places in her brain lit up. We don't have to go into orbital frontal cortex and all that kind of stuff, but 12 places in her brain. When she was held hands with a stranger, 8 places in her brain lit up. When she was holding hands with her partner, 4 places. So only 4 places needed to come online to reassure her. So it just shows that power of human connection. But if we're constantly looking for validation outside of us, that is a sign of anxiety, typically. My book, Anxiety RX, is about anxiety, but really it's about childhood trauma. For me, it showed up as chronic anxiety. For some people, it shows up as depression. Other people, it shows up as eating disorders, personality disorders. But all of it comes from some sort of unresolved childhood wounding. And it will make itself obvious. For me, when I was a child, my brother had orthopedic issues. My dad was schizophrenic. A lot of people know about that who watch my channel. So a lot of my mother's attention went to my brother and my dad. So I had this sense like, hey, what about me? Like, what about me? So I have this drive to be seen. And that's why I'm on the Mel Robbins podcast. There's a drive in me that needs to be seen and validated. But there's also a part of me that was bullied in school that hates crowds and hates attention. So for me, that's what causes. So you can have people that are highly accomplished and they're driven by their anxiety, but it's a treadmill. Eventually, after a couple of divorces, or something that happens in your life that's you can't control, then it comes out and then it's unmanageable. So it's one of the things that I see with people is looking for love in all the wrong places. All these things. Addictions are another one of those things that the reason why I think people, take drugs or alcohol or whatever is when they're in that acute phase in the brain and the GABA receptors are all lit up and you feel calm and peaceful. I think that's one of the times that people actually feel connected to themselves. It's ironic, it's odd, but in general, like anxiety, and here's one of those things that, you're so great at sound bites. Anxiety occurs because you've blocked love for yourself. That's really what happens. So one of the things that drugs and alcohol do is they take away some of those blocks. They make you feel connected to yourself.
It's so true. I've never thought about it that way.
People with anxiety and addiction hold hands. Like they are so close together. They both come from childhood wounding, and the alcohol or the drug or whatever allows people to feel connected to themselves. I just had a surgery like 3 weeks ago, and they were putting me under and they put the mask on my face. And as I went under, and because anesthetics, general anesthetics are dissociative,
right?
They separate from. So as I was going under, I'm saying, okay, I love you, Rusty. I love you, Rusty. I love you, Rusty. And Rusty's my name for my 12-year-old self, right? That suffered at the hands of his dad, who wasn't abusive or violent, but just crazy. And so I just kept saying, I love you, Rusty. I love you, Rusty. I love you, Rusty. And it was just a nice way to kind of go under. And I think that's what ketamine and these psychedelics, I think it's just a way of getting connected to yourself, because that's how you heal, is you become connected to yourself. It doesn't come from outside of you. But we have to have that love from outside of us as well, of course. And, as you talk about, the biggest relationship is the relationship you have to yourself. And as cliche and woo and all that stuff as it sounds, and as a neuroscientist and a medical doctor, I sometimes want to have a seizure when I talk about this because it's just so non-scientific. But love and healing is non-scientific. We can't reduce it down to something that we can reproduce in a science lab. And that's what heals us. So science will help us cope, but I haven't seen really science help us heal. I'm going to give one more thing, and out of all the incredible advancements we've made in neuroscience in the last 15 years, and they have been amazing, very few of those advancements have actually led to different clinical outcomes when you're sitting with a patient. So that's one of the things that I'm kind of disappointed about in science a little bit. But science is very helpful at helping us cope. Physiological side, there's a bunch of things that really help us cope. But to heal, it's an inside job. You really have to learn how to connect with that younger, wounded part of you. And if you don't, you'll always have alarm. You'll always be anxious.
I'd say the one exception is the exciting research in the area of all these psychedelics. But I think you just pointed out the reason why this is the biggest breakthrough, because when you have a guided therapeutic experience with a ketamine or an MDMA or psilocybin, you have the ability to reconnect and join in with yourself.
Absolutely.
And repair what you say is the original cause of anxiety, which is a situation in childhood where you felt separate from the caregivers whose only job was to make you feel safe and loved and looked after and cared for. And so, I want to go back to, I have this vision of there are these 3 phases as I'm listening to you speak. There is the phase of self-awareness and awakening and this kind of wake up moment where you're like, holy cow, maybe the overthinking and the obsessiveness with, achievement, maybe feeling on edge all the time. Maybe this isn't the way I'm meant to feel. Maybe this is anxiety. So there's this first phase of self-awareness and the wake-up moment. And then there's the second layer, going a little bit deeper, where you make an attempt to cope, whether that's through therapy or it is through breath work, or you mentioned meditation or exercise, the bazillion different things that you and I have both done for decades in order to cope with our anxiety, which for me meant trying to turn it down a little. And then there's a third and deeper phase, which is what you are teaching everybody. And that third phase is healing it and going deep and getting to the root cause, which you have so beautifully taught us is separation and feeling separate from others and feeling separate from yourself. And when you feel separate, you don't experience love. You don't experience safety. And so what I want to know, Dr. Kennedy, going back to Carrie's question, is there a simple series of steps that anybody who's listening today that's like, holy cow, I have anxiety, or I'm tired of coping and talking about anxiety, I want to go deeper and start the work of healing it. You mentioned inner child. Should we go back and get a photo of ourselves from when we were 8 years old? Like, give me like 3 things to do today to start that work, to go and reconnect with the part of ourselves that has been separate since childhood.
There's a lot of like woo-woo inner child stuff. Like, people get really fired up by this concept of inner child. And I find the people that get the most fired up by the inner child, oh, that's a bunch of crap or whatever, are the ones that have the most childhood wounding because they don't want to go back there. Right?
That's right. I do have to admit, anytime anybody uses those 2 words, inner child, I'm like, ugh, eye roll.
Totally.
Sounds so stupid.
Same.
But as a neuroscientist and a medical doctor who specializes in this, what the fuck are you talking about when you say inner child?
Yeah, it's the remnant of it's that for the science people, like it's the amygdala based remnant of the trauma. So for your car accident when you rolled on the ski trip, there is your amygdala coupled the sound of crunching snow with trauma. So now whenever you go to the mailbox and you hear crunching snow, your amygdala coupled that sound with the trauma. So your body will feel exactly now when you're on your way out to the mailbox as you did back then.
I want to share one other example for those of you who haven't heard the first episode that we did with Dr. Kennedy. And there's a second coupling that happened for me, which is I was molested by an older kid during a sleepover in the 4th grade. And when I woke up the next morning, I felt in every cell of my body that something was very wrong. And what happened is the trauma, and now you're saying inner child and the base of the amygdala, coupled the experience of waking up after being a victim and the feeling that something's wrong with mourning. And ever since I've been in 4th grade, I wake up every morning, and the morning itself triggers me to feel exactly the same way as a 50-year-old woman that I did when I was in the 4th grade and had woke up that morning. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah. And about that, when you came downstairs and your mom was making pancakes and she said, "How did you sleep, honey?" And you saw the other kid, if you had a chance at that point, if there was a magic wand where, you went over to your mother and said, "Hey, I've got to talk to you about something." And you went to a different room and then you talked about what happened and she soothed you. It's not your fault. She rubbed your back. That probably would have mitigated this whole thing. Because if
Wow.
we have this love and attention, this bubble that I call it, from our parents and caregivers, we are protected. So everyone has trauma in childhood. Like there's no way of avoiding, but there's a difference between like drama and trauma. Trauma is when the event actually changes your nervous system so it gets stuck in the on position. It's kind of like if you're on a railroad and the old time switch, the switches they used to have on the railroad.
Yeah. Yeah, of
So
course.
normally, if you go along, you've got good enough parents, you have a reasonable childhood, you go along the track is straight, and you just mature. Now, if you get trauma in there, it's like one of those railway switches that switches you off track. So it takes you into this mode of protection as opposed to this mode of growth. So if you keep going on the track, you're in a growth mode, you feel safe, as Einstein said, is the world a safe place? You feel safe. But when we have this trauma and it's not resolved at the time, that switch gets thrown and our nervous system changes. Again, I don't like using the word permanently because we can move it back, but the amygdala never forgets. There's always a remnant of that. So what we have to do is go back, find that child at that age, younger self, inner child. I usually use younger self because it doesn't turn people off so much, but find your younger self, give them the love and support now that they needed back then. Because again, the amygdala has no sense of time. So we can use that fact that the amygdala has no sense of time to connect with that for grade 4 and soothe her, give her what she needed back then. And that starts to heal the root cause. So then we can pull the switch back. But the older we get and the more that thing gets ingrained, the harder that switch is rusted into the on position. So every time the train goes down that track and we experience something like that, like we wake up, it goes off that track. It goes into that protection mode rather than the growth mode of going straight ahead. So if we go back, we find the switch, we heal that younger version of ourselves. And again, I know how flaky this sounds. And as a neuroscientist, it's really difficult for me to talk about the younger self, inner child. But I know after suffering from 30 plus years of crippling anxiety myself, this was the only thing that allowed me to heal, was to go back. I'm a yoga teacher. I meditation teacher. I've done all this stuff. I've done it all. And nothing really helped. And like you, I have morning anxiety or alarm. It wakes me up. I feel it. And then I just, the big thing about having the alarm is don't add thoughts to it. Like allow the alarm to be there. Go into sensation, use your breath, use the grounding that you're around. If you're lying in your bed, feel the grounding, feel the support, feel your body, even if it's uncomfortable. And then go back and find that younger version of yourself. So you're asking for sort of a stepwise thing. So basically, when people get anxious, they go into their heads and they start overthinking. And that's a trap because you'll never get out of that. You'll never get out of that overthinking because the mind will tell you. The mind says, hey, we have the answer with more thinking. And it's like, well, I thought anxiety was a problem of overthinking. It's like, no, it's not. It's not. Just keep thinking. And that doesn't work. So what you have to do is go into your body. Now, the problem is your body feels alarmed. So why am I going to go down into my body when it feels alarmed? And that's why we have things like internal family systems therapy, somatic experiencing, psychedelics to some extent, to make you feel safe in your body again. Because once you feel safe in your body again, then you have the platform. So when you're feeling anxious, or as I like to say, alarmed, go, where in my body do I feel this? Where is it? For me, it's in my solar plexus. I talk about that in the book. But find where the alarm is in your system. And some people it's in their throat. Some people it's across their shoulders. But see if you can put your hand over it and just sort of make a mental connection with that alarm and see if you don't feel better almost instantly. Now, it's not going to take it away, But there is a sense when I first started doing this, it's like, hey, this is the first time in 30 years that I'm actually on the right track. So when you feel anxious, don't go into your head, go into the sensation of your body, even if it hurts. Find that alarm, find where it is. Because I drill down with people. It's like, does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Does it have a temperature? Like I really drill down in there because there's a part of our brain called the insular cortex, that's kind of like the mediator between the thinking brain and the feeling body. And that insula, I think, will be in the next few years really important in changing this old pattern so that when we feel it in our body, we can go back, feel the exact same way that we did back at the time, you with crunching snow, and me in the mornings as well, and go, okay, there is a different path. I can actually flip the railway switch back over to the growth part and get out of protection. So it's really about connecting with that feeling of alarm in your body, because that feeling of alarm in your body is your younger self.
This feels like a good place to stop for a second, hear a word from our sponsors. And then when we come back, Dr. Kennedy, I want to go back to Carrie's question and talk about specific tools that you can use to start to address this now that we know what we're dealing with. We'll be right back.
Hey Mel, I'm a 53-year-old woman, a creative leader with, to the outside world at least, a so-called great career, I guess you'd say, but with crippling anxiety and exhausting overthinking. Traveling, accompanied by panic attacks, what the heck. I've had this issue for 30 years, and all the guided meditations and mindfulness training pods in the world aren't helping. So what steps can I take to stop this, to heal and find a new peace before I chuck in the towel and just barricade myself in at home? Thanks for everything. Bye.
Welcome back. I'm Mel Robbins, and that was a listener of the Mel Robbins podcast named Carrie. Today, we are talking anxiety toolkit. How do you heal from it? We're here with the world-renowned Dr. Russell Kennedy, and we've been talking about how all anxiety begins in childhood, which is why if you're ever going to heal it, you're going to have to go back to those moments in your past and in your childhood that were painful, when you felt unsafe or separate. And I promised that we would take Carrie's question and now dive into tools. What are specific tools that we can use, Dr. Kennedy, to truly start to heal this? Do you print out a photo of yourself when you were little and you make that your screensaver, which it feels like we should? How do you start? Oh my gosh. Oh,
That's me at 3.
Rusty.
Yep, that's Rusty.
So for those of you who are listening to this and not watching this podcast on YouTube, Dr. Kennedy just held up the homepage of his phone, and there was a photo of him that's 3 years old. It just made my heart go,
Yeah, he's pretty cute.
So what does it do
cute.
if you do that for yourself?
Well, that's the start, right? Because there's so much resistance to going back to visiting. That's the big thing, because the child in us needs this love and support so much that it creates all this alarm to get our attention. And yet as adults, we push the alarm away. So it's kind of like, I think I might have mentioned this in the last, podcast that we did, is that if a child came up to you with their hands up in a grocery store, like they'd lost their parents, of course you would soothe them. But we have this alarm that goes off in our system, which is essentially the younger version of us going, hey, pick me up. Pick me up. I need some attention. I need some love. And instead we go to the internet and zombie scroll Instagram or go into our addictions or whatever. And we push that child away. So the child just gets louder. The alarm just gets louder and louder and louder. But there is a resistance to going back. So the adult doesn't want to go back and visit the child because the child holds all their pain. And the child has a real mistrust of us as adults because we've been ignoring their alarm for 30 years. So it's really important that we start slowly and you make that connection. So when you say get a picture, that can be really triggering for people. So sometimes I just say, in your mind's eye, picture yourself at any age as a child that you want. Picture what you're wearing. Picture yourself maybe at a happy time in your life. Like for you, it was like skiing or something like that. Picture yourself in this happy place. And that way you start making that connection because, just to go in and it's you're going to blow your brains out if you go back in and you go right to the child, go right to the trauma. So go to a place that you felt good. And I use this a lot when I work with people is what was the best time in your life? Like what was the best time in your life, Mel?
I just immediately had this image of being on the front yard of our house in Michigan. And there were all kinds of kids around, and it was a beautiful summer night. And it was kind of that time of night where it's not quite dark, but it's not quite daytime. It's that beautiful. It's my favorite time of night, dusk, when the twinkly stars first start to come out, and it's kind of confusing because the sun's up, but you see the moon, and you know that the sun's about to set. And we are playing games, like we're playing base and statue and all kinds of just tag and like just that moment right there with my brother and a bunch of other kids in the neighborhood running around being kids in the front yard of our house in Michigan where I grew up.
Okay, so close your eyes and really get into that image. Like see your brother, see your house. Relax your shoulders, relax your jaw. Nice breath in and out. Just really see if you can drink in the emotion of that. And where you feel it in your body. Where do you feel that in your body?
Oh, I kind of feel it from my cheeks all the way to my heart. It's like this sort of like definitely like for sure the heart.
So this is something I would add to high-fiving yourself in the mirror is go back to the best time in your life. When you're high-fiving yourself in the mirror, because then we're getting your insulin involved, we're getting your brain involved in this whole feeling state, because the feeling state is what changes us. We can change our thoughts at a dime, but the feeling state is what changes our nervous system. So when you do the high five habit, when you're high-fiving yourself in the mirror, recall the best time in your life and just try and see if you can really get a felt sense of that. Now, what I will do with people who have suffered trauma is I will take them, once I have them grounded and once they trust me and stuff, I will take them into their trauma and then I will take them into the best time in their life. So with you, I might do, and we're shortening this considerably for the podcast, but for you, I might say, okay, if you feel safe enough that we talk about that kid, waking up with that kid on top of you and getting into that feeling. Now, where do you feel that in your body? And is this okay,
like
Mel, to
right
go into
in the
this?
gut.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Like right in the
Okay.
gut. Like I immediately was like went from like the heart being full to like right in the gut. And the
Okay.
ankles, weird, the ankles.
So what I would do is I would go back and go, okay, now go back to that feeling of dusk. You can see your house, you're playing statue. It's fun. You feel calm, peaceful, happy. Now let's go into your gut. Let's go into that sensation again of, waking up with that kid on top of you. If it's okay to stay there for a second. And then lovingly go back up into that place in your chest and your throat where you felt really peaceful and happy playing with your brother.
It's amazing because I feel the gut like pulling me down. Like that. It's easy to drop into the gut.
Yep.
And the bad experience. It's hard to pull yourself from that back up into this experience that I can feel that's positive. Is that normal?
That's absolutely normal. We're wired that way, Mel. We're wired to pay more attention to fearful situations than pleasurable ones. Because in our evolution, that's basically what kept us alive. So in healing this, we have to heal this at a feeling level. We can talk about that kid on top of you for the rest of your life without really changing it too much. You might get a better understanding of it cognitively, but to really change that sensation, we have to use another sensation because that's the language of trauma is sensation. It's the body. So we use that good feeling that you have, and then we go back and forth. We oscillate between back and forth, and it starts weakening that power, that negative feeling in your body that you associate with being a victim, with being helpless.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing about, when I love when you say you're talking about play, because the way this comes into play is trauma activates both the sympathetic, the fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, at the same time, because we're
Oh,
so
I didn't know
confused.
that.
We don't know. Yeah. Because once you get up to a certain point in sympathetic activity, your body can't handle it anymore. So it shuts down. So we go into parasympathetic. We don't go into pleasant parasympathetic, but we go into shutdown parasympathetic. And then it goes back and forth and back and forth. And a lot of us with anxiety, that's what happens during the day. We go into this place where our body just gets exhausted. So we feel okay. We don't feel that tremendous, anxiety anymore. And then once we get rested in the parasympathetic, then the sympathetic comes back online and we go right back into anxiety again. So the thing about play, and play is so important for healing, is it's another thing that activates both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic activity at the same time. So trauma activates co-activation, they call it. So trauma activates parasympathetic and sympathetic simultaneously. So does play. But play allows you to start metabolizing. So when you're in co-activation, when your parasympathetic and your sympathetic is active at the same time, it's like having your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. When you're in play, you start realizing, hey, you know what? This sensation is actually okay. It doesn't have to fire me right into the trauma. So that's why play, one of the reasons why play is so important in healing trauma, is because we get that felt sense of activation of both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic at the same time in a safe place, because play is safe and it's fun.
Okay, so going back to Carrie, and number one, it was very clear to you as an expert and a medical doctor and a neuroscientist that she's dealing with stored trauma. And step one is kind of recognizing that. And then the next thing she needs to do is to recognize that thinking keeps you in the coping, and that this is really going to be about dropping into your body and learning how to reconnect and heal in your body. And one of the things that you have recommended is that we think about this as younger self-work, and that you can go back to positive times and feel that good sensation, that if you're ready for it, printing out a photo of yourself or putting it on your phone so that you are reconnecting with that version of you where you started to feel separate or unsafe or scared. And that is a way to start this process. Is there anything else that you would recommend that Carrie think about?
Yeah, you have to do it slowly. You have to start, because the thing is, when we go into our alarm, we don't want to go in there. Like, it feels painful to go in there. So do it slowly, and this is, if you have a real significant trauma, emotional, physical, sexual abuse, you probably need a therapist, and maybe a somatic therapist, to kind of help you get into this place. Because it's not for amateurs in a way. If you have big trauma, if you have trauma that's manageable, absolutely you can work it on your own. But if you have big T trauma, doing this on your own can re-traumatize. So you need someone else there. You need someone there who you wish was there at the time of the trauma. And that person is you. That person is you. It's like, you can go back. We can use our amygdala. We can use that sense that we are not locked in time. We can go back and find that, like what I have on my phone. I can look at his eyes. I can imagine his eyes too. And there's a great song by Peter Gabriel that I listen. We're getting into Dr. Kennedy's world a little bit. Every morning I do this meditation that I make for myself. And then on top of that, I end it all by listening to Peter Gabriel's song, In Your Eyes. So he has two versions. One's a recorded, which is about 5 minutes, and one's a live version. And he talks about in your eyes, and it's about in your eyes as a child. The light, the peace, I am complete. I see the vision of 1,000 doors. I see my divinity. I see my connection with myself. And I look at that little picture of me that's here on my phone while I listen to that song. And the lyrics of that song are so powerful. If you imagine, all my instincts, they return. Like all your instincts return when you connect with that version of yourself that was hurt and in pain. That's what happens. And that's how you heal from anxiety and alarm. We could cope all we want, but if you want to heal, you have to find that child in you, and you have to show them that they're seen, heard, loved, and protected. And one of the ways that I do that every day is I start my day with that song, looking at him. And I use different pictures of me, but that's the main one because it's on my phone and it's right there already.
I worry a lot about anxiety, and I worry about how we seem to have a parenting crisis of parents who can't tolerate their kids' anxiety and are allowing their kids' anxiety to run the house. Can you give us some advice, especially given that teenagers are such emotional beings to begin with? How do you give space for the normal emotion without letting a teenager's emotion run your house or dictate what they do?
Well, thank you for bringing up this. I mean, it's a huge topic. And actually, between Untangled and the Emotional Lives of Teenagers, I published a book called Under Pressure, Confronting the Epidemic of Stress and Anxiety in Girls. But what I hear all the time is 80% applies to kids of all genders, which I am sure is true. And in that book, I actually make, at the outset, a case for healthy anxiety and a case for healthy stress. And we have always, as psychologists, recognized that healthy anxiety is the anxiety that alerts us when something's wrong. It is not on its own pathological. And we have not helped the situation by using the same word to describe healthy anxiety and something that we diagnose. It's sort of better. We have the word sadness and we have depression for the diagnosis, but we use anxiety, in both categories. So that doesn't help us much. And same with stress. Stress is actually the human experience of adaptation. We experience stress anytime things change, anytime we have to adapt to a new condition, and it can be a wonderful condition or a lousy condition, but we always experience stress under changed conditions. And we only consider stress pathological if it is chronic or traumatic. But all other stress, we just tuck into the, helping you grow, doesn't always feel good category. What I will tell you is that the most important thing for people to know about anxiety is that avoidance feeds anxiety. And this is one of the, again, most critical findings in psychology, and one that we have done a completely terrible job of getting out to the public. And here's how it works. If I, let's say, have some social avoidance, some social anxiety, and there's a party that I've been invited to, and it's a good party to go to, right? It's a rational, should be fun, a friend of mine's party. But say I feel anxious, and say I agree to go to the party, but then the day of, my anxiety is starting to really accelerate. And then I'm thinking, I don't think I should go, I don't want to go. And say my parent is like, it's just a party, you don't have to go, right? Here's what happens. The first thing that happens is I feel so much better, right? My anxiety was cresting, and then I get to avoid, and it immediately plummets. It's like what we call reinforcement, right? Instantly relief. And so the upshot of that is the next time I feel anxious, I know what helps me feel better. It's avoidance. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that I never go to the party and check out how it is, right? So whatever I have daydreamed about how terrifying this party is, or how cruel everyone will be at the party, that is now sealed in amber. And I continue to believe it because I have no counter evidence. Whereas if I go to the party, I'm like, oh, wait, it's not so bad. But if I don't go, so it actually entrenches anxiety to avoid the things we fear. Now, if a kid is avoiding school, which a lot of kids are right now, there's a third issue, which is the minute you don't show up at school, you are out of the loop socially and you are out of the loop academically. So it's that much harder to get back in. So there's not a lot in psychology where there is agreement across the entire field, where there is zero controversy. But on this one, everyone's in agreement that avoidance feeds anxiety, and everyone is in agreement that exposure is the answer. And what I mean by that is you have to get in. You have to, you don't have to go to every party all the time, but you have to baby step your way in. You have to go check out the party. You cannot have the reinforcement avoidance. You cannot have the daydream become the reality. And so if this is your kid and they're like, I can't go to school, I can't go to the party, I can't, fill in the blank, you say, all right, here's the deal. You're going to go to the party for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to forget something and text you and see if, you need me to pick you up. And if you need me to pick you up after 20 minutes, I'll get you. But if you can stay, that would be better. So you have to negotiate. You have to help them get in. Breathing is powerful for helping to control anxiety. Reframing is powerful for helping to control anxiety. But avoidance is anxiety's best friend.
It's devastating because you're right. Like, I think about the fact that I was homesick at every camp, so much so that I would just escalate it until the counselors got so tired, then my parents would show up because it works. It goes back to your original thing. We do these things because they work.
They work.
And when we allow our kid to keep transferring from one school to another because they can't handle it, we are locking in anxiety as a coping mechanism and avoidance as a coping mechanism. This is from an 11th grader.
This is an interesting.
Anxiety is consuming me, and I'm so scared. 11th grade.
Okay. Well, I think my first thing is that you're not alone. I think a lot of people feel it. I also have anxiety, and it's very scary. It is very scary, and it can feel very consuming. My anxiety, I'll give you a little peek into my window is what I get like. But when I was younger, I used to be very scared of throwing up. And so my anxiety morphed into this thing now, even nowadays, that whenever I'm anxious, I just feel as though I'm going to throw up. I never do, but I always feel like I'm going to throw up. And it was very overbearing. It was very scary, and I felt very alone for a lot of it, and I felt very misunderstood. And my advice to you is that if it is feeling like you cannot live your life anymore, you should seek a therapist, or you should tell somebody. Maybe not a therapist, tell a parent, tell a friend, just tell anybody. That is huge. That's the first step. Because then you're not letting it run your life. You're showing that you're in control. You can tell people what's going on.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So when you say you can't live your life, do you mean the anxiety is getting to a point where you're like opting out of doing things?
Yes.
You're
Yes.
managing your anxiety because you're so worried about your anxiety
that you're like not living your life. Like your friends are all hanging out and they're going out to dinner and you're too anxious. So you're just like, I don't want to be anxious. Like, I don't want to go.
And that was you.
That was me. So that's when you should start telling somebody. I have two things I want to add on to that. I said something about therapy. Therapy's great. I love therapy. I have a great therapist. And second is medication is also great. When I took medication as a kid, I was like, I'm different from everybody. Like, I have to take medication because I have a problem. There's something wrong with me. But there's nothing wrong with you if you take medication. I mean, literally everybody takes medication. Like, I take it all to Advil's like medication. Like, there's nothing wrong with you if you're taking medication for anxiety. And honestly, if you're taking medication, like, you're going to be able to live your life better. You're going to be able to go out to that dinner with your friends. You're going to be able to go on that walk or that run. You're going to have a good time.
So do what you need to do to get the anxiety under control.
Yeah. And I recommend, if you don't know where to start, just tell somebody. Tell somebody. And tell them everything. Like, don't leave some stuff out. Don't be like, hey, I'm kind of anxious every now and then. Like, be like, I am anxious and it is terrifying every day.
Great. And here's the other thing. The tools and strategies that are out there actually work.
Yeah, they do work.
And anxiety is a scary thing, but it's temporary. If you follow the tools and strategies that work.
It is 100% temporary. Yeah.
Yeah. And you will feel better.
The best feeling, I can assure you, is when you look back and you're like, I was at a bottomless pit and now I'm outside and I'm looking back at it and I'm like, wow, like I felt that way. That's crazy.
Yeah. You can't even believe that you felt that bad.
Mm-mm.
That was me a year. Do you remember Mother's Day a year ago?
I remember a lot of things a year ago. I remember a lot.
When I was sobbing about the fact that we had sold our house and I was begging Dad to try to get it back because I didn't want to move here.
Yeah, I remember that.
And you three kids were here.
I remember I like told my friends, I was like, guys, we're going to move back to like Massachusetts. Like my mom's like pretty sure this time. Like, you should see her.
She is freaking. I was in a full blown anxiety attack. What was it like for you as a kid to see me lose it? Like really have a mental health breakdown?
I think it was helpful and scary.
How is it helpful?
Because it's nice to know that your parents, it's nice to know that your parents can break down, and that like, if you as a kid see your parent as this strong, like tall, super emotionally put together person, that's how you're going to see them forever. And when you grow up and you see your parent break down for the first time, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, like what? And so when I was a kid and I was young and I saw you break down and I saw you break down again in the future, I was like, oh, like this is just what happens. Like people break down, like it's totally fine. Maybe not totally fine, but like
it's fine.
I was used to it. Yeah.
You can't be happy all the time.
Nobody's happy all the time.
No. And life is going to be ups and downs. And I think you're right. It is helpful to watch the adults in your life process things and realize that there are periods in your life where you're going to feel like you're in a bottomless pit.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the clouds pass and things are sunny again.
Yeah.
And that's just part of life.
Yeah. And you don't need to share like the nitty gritty with your kids. You don't need to tell them everything that's like making you upset or why, but you know, let them in. Like they are part of your family. They're there to support you. It's good to tell them how you're feeling and how you can be supported.
Yeah. My 14-year-old son is dyslexic and feels different.
Twins.
My 14-year-old son is dyslexic and feels different and dumb and shuts down instead of trying harder. Help.
I like this question because when I was diagnosed with dyslexia as a kid, I felt the same way. I was like, I'm so dumb. Like I can't read. I can't believe this. Like I'm dumber than everybody. And I like remember you'd be like, well, the people on Shark Tank are dyslexic. And I was like, shut the fuck up. Like I don't care about the people on Shark Tank. They don't matter. All right. They could be dyslexic, but they're also multimillionaires. Like I'm 11. All right. What do I have? All right. I have $2 to my name. But what I'm gonna say is that there's a lot of techniques and skills you can learn to make dyslexia more manageable. It's also different for everybody. It's different in that sense. But you are not dumb if you are dyslexic. What's actually happening is that, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but like the scientific thing is that your neural pathways like take longer to form. And so you can have the same strong neural pathways as other people, it just takes a little bit longer to get there. Is that right?
Basically, your brain wiring is a little bit different, and there are techniques and strategies that you can use to really, like, you basically had your dyslexia remediated.
Yeah.
By
you can have it like pushed down.
Yeah, because you just basically train your brain to wire and fire new neural pathway connections, and it's called Orton-Gillingham. That is the gold standard tutoring method. And so it's not about trying harder. And that's what is really important. Your brain learns differently. And because you're dyslexic, you have profoundly different talents.
Yeah.
You know, you're being asked to sit in a classroom and do things that your brain is not firing to do, but I bet that you are way more creative than everybody else.
Yep.
I bet that you can solve problems in creative ways. I bet
sure.
you are probably more talkative.
Yeah, definitely.
I bet you have much better, profound spatial awareness, meaning you're phenomenal at video games and at Legos and about building things. And you're going to be you're an incredible problem solver. And so understanding that you've got these unbelievable talents that developed because other parts of your brain developed.
Yeah.
That is a superpower.
For sure.
And that's why so many entrepreneurs and actors and professors and people in the arts have dyslexia, because by not having the neural pathways fully formed as it relates to reading and holding words in your mind and decoding words and also holding pencils and being able to write, you developed other parts of your brain. And that's a really cool thing. And so first of all, I would say stop saying try harder
Yeah.
And if you have not gotten the proper tutoring protocols put in place that really help, and other things really help, like being able to listen to books instead of reading.
Yeah. I listen to books all the time.
Yeah.
Because like I'm not the best reader, so like I'm a little slow, but listening to books is huge. Like that's great.
Yeah, and also being able to type instead of handwrite. There, you can get the teacher's notes. There are all kinds of things that help. And I remember it was really interesting because you're an excellent math student, but when professors or teachers require you to show your work, you basically fail because you can't explain the steps that you took to get there.
Yeah.
Your brain has all
I
these
just
shortcuts.
like can do it in my head, and like I can
Yes.
I write down a few numbers just to remember things, but other than that, like I can't really. So if you have dyslexia, you're not dumb. All right.
What are you?
You're incredibly powerful in other aspects that aren't the school environment.
Yeah,
And that's perfectly fine because school is not your whole life.
that's right. I love that. I want to talk about a topic that listeners around the world are writing in about. And it is the documented and alarming spike in depression and anxiety
Yes.
and mental health issues,
Yes.
particularly in young
Yes.
adults.
Yes.
And when I hear a lot of experts talk about it, they just talk in broad strokes. Can you help us understand
Yes.
the various factors that have gone into this spike? Because I feel like
Yes.
I don't know what to stop controlling. You know what I mean? Like if the main behavior that we need to get ourselves to change is this constant need to control other people in our lives, particularly our kids,
Right.
and to become more conscious
Right.
to letting go
Right.
and being in the moment.
Right.
How do we do that on a topic where you've got somebody that you really care about that's deeply like in the spiral
Okay.
of anxiety or depression?
Okay. So there are several layers to your question. So number one, what do we do with all this disease that we're seeing?
Yes.
Really dis-ease from within. It is a symbol and a symptom of inner disconnect, right? We're disconnected. And while we were always, I think, disconnected since the birth of the agricultural revolution and technology and industrialization, in the past 30 years, we have seen technology in front of our eyes take over our lives to the point where we are using technology as proxies, as surrogates for relationships. Now, children need presence. They need a parent who embodies the here and now attunement and alignment in order to thrive. Now, when the parent is constantly distracted on a screen, using the screen as a proxy for their own anxiety management as medication, the child now is not getting the source of warmth, of connection, of soothing, safety, security, significance from the primary caregiver. It's also beginning to rely on the same proxies. So this is why we have seen a greater incline in mental disease now than ever before, because our proxies have multiplied. We have a proxy in the back pocket. We have a proxy in the car. We have a proxy in the back of the car and the trunk. We have batteries and chargers and adapters and 10 devices. So we are now replacing human-to-human connection, which is the core foundational essence of quote-unquote good parenting with these proxies. So our children are feeling that lack. So mental health is rising. I know it's a broad answer. What do we do about it, right? What do? We take our children in our charge soon. We don't wait for the schools to relinquish technology. We can do it at home. Each parent has the power in their own microcosm at home to increase connectivity with their children. If we want to raise children who are secure, well empowered in adulthood, they require the first 10 years of true presence. It doesn't mean daily, moment by moment presence, but it's the embodiment of that energy. So we have to do away with the screens. We have to be decluttered in our own schedules, in our own agendas, cut out all the 10,000 activities. All of that is a waste of time for the most part. Focus on the connection between parent and child or siblings and keep it simple. You know, what happened in the pandemic was really a tragedy in many ways in so many people's lives, but it was a call back to simplicity, a call back to consciousness, a call back to connection. But now we've lost it again. So you will see this rise continuing because children know that they're missing. They can feel it. They're like, where are my connected parents? Why am I not in nature? Why am I sitting in front of this plastic one-dimensional screen, clicking on buttons that are artificial? They sense it, and their psyche suffers.
So, Dr. Shefali, are you saying that modern parenting, where we are parenting with a phone in our hand and we ourselves are not present because we are on the screen and we are distracted and we are overscheduled and we are anxious and worried, is the direct cause of the anxiety that our kids are feeling? I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, but the parent, if we can't blame the parent, because
I don't mind. Like, I'll take the blame.
Right.
Like, I see my responsibility.
Right, but greater than that. Like, instead of just focusing on the parent, we have to see it as a system of parents, right? I call it the parenting industrial complex. This is not just one parent. The parent is being swallowed by a system, and the system is to be called to task. And it takes people like us who are out there with a microphone to be the harbingers of a new tomorrow, where we inform parents, hey, you can do it differently. Just because everyone in the neighborhood is doing it this way, I'm here to tell you it's harmful. Listen, pay heed. Of course, it takes courage, but there is a way to do things differently, and that's what I teach.
So are there specific recommendations? Because I agree with you. I think we all know that this is something we have majorly screwed up.
Yes.
And I love that you use the word we've been swallowed by it.
Yeah.
And there is that sense that, well, everybody else, my kid's going to be the one that's left out. And if they're left out and they're not on the smartphone and they're not doing this and they can't do that, then they're going to experience more anxiety. And so our anxiety about what they're going to feel is creating this pressure to do things that you know instinctively.
Right.
This doesn't work. It doesn't work that I'm sitting out at dinner at a restaurant. My 4-year-old is watching an iPad and my teenager is texting under the table.
Right.
This doesn't work. It's not good for anybody.
Yes.
All right. So, Cameron, I'm really excited. I'm going to teach you how to create and use what I call a confidence anchor, not only when you're about to fly and you're nervous, but for any single situation where you're nervous to do something. Okay. Are you ready?
Yep.
Awesome. It's super cool. And for you listening, I want you to just hold that situation that you're nervous about. So maybe you're nervous to give a presentation at work, or maybe you have a son or a daughter who is getting recruited for a sport, and now there's all these big team matches coming up and they're starting to get nervous. This confidence anchor is exactly what you need. So step number 1 is you're going to think about this situation that makes you nervous, okay? And we've already talked about that, Cameron. It's this flight to Portugal. Step number 2 is come up with something about this situation that actually makes you excited. So describe for me, Cameron, what are you excited to do when you get to Portugal?
I think the thing that I'm most excited for is to see my sister. I haven't seen her in a couple months. She's been in London. So I don't know. When I think about Portugal, there's a lot of things I'm excited for, but probably the biggest thing is just to spend time with her. And
I love it.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Okay, great. So you now have something related to the situation that makes you nervous that you're actually excited about, okay? Now, number 3 is the most important part. Number 3 is now that you have something that you're excited about, I want you to close your eyes and we're going to bring it to life. I want you to imagine the moment that you lay eyes on your sister for the first time in several months. And I'm imagining, are you imagining the airport or a cobblestone street? Like, what is the scene? Describe with your eyes closed. What is she wearing? What happens? Describe it for us.
Well, first of all, she's probably, I don't know, she's probably mad that we're late about something. But when I think about it, we're yeah, we're in probably like Lisbon where we're going to land, and probably right outside, the first glance of a new city, something that is always really exciting when you leave an airport. I think that's the best part about flying, is getting to somewhere you're, anticipating seeing. So I picture that. I picture her standing there, probably like in some black sweater, because that's usually what she's wearing. And yeah, I think seeing her face reacting to my mom, me, and my brother, that's going to be like the best part, because I know she, even if she won't admit it, she does miss us a lot. So
Awesome. And who is she going to hug first?
100% my mom.
Okay, awesome. And how
I'll probably be
amazing.
last.
Okay. And as you stand there and watch her in her black sweater with Lisbon in the background hugging your mom, what are you feeling?
Like a sense of comfort, a sense of wholeness, and yeah, just a really good feeling to have us all together during like a really hard time of the year. It's gonna be really special.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's your confidence anchor. That moment that you just described in detail, the black sweater, Lisbon in the background, her reaction as she sees you, her hugging your mother first, the wholeness, the comfort, all of that you just felt in your body, that is your confidence anchor. Now, here's how you're going to use it. From now until that moment happens, the millisecond that you feel any nerves or any fear or any negative thought come up related to this thought, you're going to close your eyes. You can use my 5-second rule to interrupt the worries. Just count backwards with me. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yep. That is a starting ritual that will signal to your brain that you're not going to think about a plane crash. You are starting to think about something else. And then you are going to bring to the forefront of your mind that image, that feeling that you just described. And that is how you drop a confidence anchor on these bullshit nerves and worries that have been hijacking your life. That's what a confidence anchor is. You're using your own excitement about something that normally makes you nervous to shatter the grip that fear and nerves has on your body and your mind. That's what you're going to do. And when you head to the airport on the way to the plane, you are going to use this same confidence anchor. And when you get on that plane and your thoughts go, uh-oh, you're going to go, nope, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you're going to drop that confidence anchor. And when you take off in the middle of the night and the pilot says, we might experience a little bit of turbulence, because pilots often say that, you're going to drop that confidence anchor. And you're going to come back over and over and over again to this image of your sister and the black sweater and Lisbon behind her and her hugging your mother. That's exactly what you're going to do. And you're going to be shocked, because this is a technique that they studied at Harvard Business School called reframing performance anxiety, was the name of the study. Reframing performance anxiety. And it's a way to flip moments that make you nervous into moments that make you excited, and to keep control of your mind, body, and spirit so that your fears don't hijack and torture you.
Wow.
What do you think?
I mean, it makes sense, because I think in the moments of panic, the last thing I'm doing is thinking about anything that brings me happiness. It's always the darkest feelings, the heaviest emotions, versus, even just closing my eyes just now. I feel so different, like sitting here. I feel like even thinking about that moment makes me happy. And I'm excited to use it because I know I'm going to be anxious all next week, week after.
So you want to know why this works?
I do. Seems
Okay.
too good to be true, honestly. It seems too good to be true.
Well, the reason why it works is because it taps into your body's automatic systems. If you look into the neuroscience on this, scientists call this an autonomic response, that basically your nervous system has a autonomic response to stressful situations. Okay, that, like, if you're a normal person like me, you just say, oh yeah, if we're in a stressful situation, we automatically feel all kinds of things, right? And so what I want you to understand is that, when we're in situations that make us nervous, everybody, whether you're giving a speech or you're going into an interview or you're on a first date or you're running a track meet or you're getting on a plane or you're breaking up with somebody or you're going in for a job interview, it is going to be automatic that your nerves take over because you're about to do something that makes you stressed out a little bit. It's requiring you to feel, it makes you feel a little bit vulnerable. But here's the cool thing. Even though you have this automatic response, because you're right, there's no way over the next 5 weeks you're not going to feel anxious because that's the autonomic response that your body has to this stressful thing. But here's the cool thing, Cameron, you can control this. So here's the secret. The secret is understanding that your body's reactions to fear, so your automatic reaction to a fearful situation, is the exact same as your body's automatic response to an exciting situation. And we're going to use this truth that your body's automatic reaction to fear is the same as your body's automatic reaction to excitement to your advantage. So tell me about a situation that makes you excited, like just something like in your day-to-day life, okay? Give me a situation that makes you excited.
In my day-to-day life, that makes me excited.
Well, how about this? Who's your favorite musician?
I really like the Lumineers.
Okay, great. Guess what? The Lumineers are playing a private concert at the new private venue at the Fenway Park. You, my friend, not only have front row seats, you're going to meet them before the show.
Okay.
It's 5 weeks out. How do you feel?
Jittery a little bit. Like kind of the same feeling I would have if I, was playing a big soccer game or running an important race when I was younger, like the clammy hands, the pit in your stomach.
Yep. Dude, we're walking into this venue. You're walking up to the front row. How you feeling?
My heart's beating fast. I'm like going a million miles an hour. I don't know. Probably feeling like really on edge.
Yeah, the usher is coming up to be like, okay, they're ready to meet you. How you feeling?
I'd be like, okay, like, let me collect myself. Yeah, probably really flustered and I don't know, like a little bit anxious probably. So
it kind of sounds like a situation like that where you're about to meet your favorite band. Which I would say, is that a positive or a negative experience?
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I mean, a positive one, obviously.
Well, it sounds very similar to the way that you experience the thought of flying to Portugal.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, you want to know the only difference? When you're in the situation that's positive, that makes you excited, and you're about to meet the Lumineers, your brain is telling you you're excited. Your brain is telling you the jitters in your stomach are butterflies. And that's a good thing. Your brain is telling you your hands are clammy and your heart is racing because something good's about to happen. The only difference between that and what you experience as you think about flying to Portugal is what your brain is saying about the flight. When you start to experience butterflies in your stomach as you are about to board the flight, your brain's going, uh-oh, there's something wrong. This is negative. The plane's going to crash. You're experiencing in your body, Cameron, the exact same physical and physiological symptoms when you meet the Lumineers as when you board a plane. And the only difference is what your brain is saying about it. And so the reason why a confidence anchor works is we are going to shut your negative brain down and drop this confidence anchor right on it like a sledgehammer. And we're going to replace your narrative that something's wrong with, holy shit, I'm about to see my sister. This is so exciting. It's as exciting as meeting the Lumineers. And when your brain starts to say the butterflies are positive, you won't escalate into a panic attack. You will have taken control. How cool is that?
That's pretty cool.
So, do you have any questions about the confidence anchor and how you're going to use it?
It just honestly seems still a little bit too good to be true. Like, I don't know. I can just conquer all my fears just by flipping the way I'm thinking.
There's a scientific reason why this works. So they researched this at Harvard Business School. And what they did is they put people in control groups and put them in situations that made them nervous. So they put one group into a control group where they had to run a track meet. Another one had to sing karaoke. Another one was in like a debating competition. And they taught one group of people to use this reframing tool where you think about something related to the track meet or the debating competition or karaoke that you're excited about. And so this group was taught to say, I'm excited. I'm excited to run this meet. I'm excited to get up there on the stage and conquer my fears. I'm excited to go and debate because I've prepared. The people who use this simple reframing tool outperformed the people who didn't. They felt less nervous, and there's a scientific reason why. Earlier, we talked about the fact that there are these automatic responses that our body has to situations that are exciting or stressful. And in our case, Cameron, we talked about the Lumineers and how that's exciting, meeting the Lumineers, and getting on a plane to Portugal, which used to make you nervous. Just talking about those two situations created an automatic response in your body, didn't it?
Yep.
That automatic response is nothing more than a series of chemicals firing and messages firing between your brain and your nervous system. The reason why you and I get butterflies is because when the brain sends a message down to your nervous system that, holy cow, we got to get on a plane, or holy cow, the Lumineers are about to walk in, your nervous system goes, oh, got it, and immediately starts changing up the chemicals in your body. Adrenaline fires. The blood races to your head and to your heart. That's why your heart starts pounding. That's why your thoughts start to race. Now you get butterflies because the signal in your brain going to your gut just changed the chemicals in your digestive tract. That's why we all get butterflies. That's it. And so in the situation with the Lumineers, you flipped your thoughts. I'm excited to meet them. And so that explains all the reasons why you have all of these changes going on in your body, why your heart is racing, why your butterflies are in your stomach. This automatic response doesn't scare you because you're thinking positive thoughts when it comes to the Lumineers. Now, when you get on the plane and your brain signals to your stomach that something's up and your heart starts to race because the blood goes to your heart, and the butterflies start to flutter in your stomach because the chemical structure just changed in your digestive tract. If you have negative thoughts about the plane, a couple things happen. You start to get scared of the automatic response in your body. And more cortisol starts to flood your brain, which is the stress hormone. And once that happens, what they found at the Harvard Business School study is that the cortisol interferes with your brain's ability to do whatever you had prepared to do. This is why most of us, when we stand on a stage, go blank. It's because we have an automatic response. Our brain goes, oh shit. We get scared of our racing heart because we think it means that the plane's about to crash or about to screw something up. The cortisol floods our brain and we forget what we prepared. When the cortisol floods your brain, you forget about seeing your sister. You forget about all the exciting things. You forget about all the research that you did that shows that traveling by commercial airplane is the safest way to travel, period. That's why this matters. And it's more than just thinking positive thoughts. It's critical that you come up with the thing you're excited about before you get into the situation. Because once your thoughts start to race and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to screw up this test, or oh my God, I'm going to screw up this interview, or oh no, the plane, you've already lost control. You have to come up with this exciting anchor and this confidence anchor before you start to get nervous. Got it?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
It just makes so much sense. You know, I always have taken the approach of calm down, Cam, like, you know, kind of making myself to be the bad guy. And not really reframing it in any way, just letting myself kind of soak in all the stress and anxiety. And just kind of reprimand myself, being like, what the heck, you know, why are you not just calming down? Like, there's a 6-year-old that's, you know, bouncing around and it's like, ooh, I love when the plane goes up and down. And it's like, why can't I be like that 6-year-old? But
let me tell you why.
I think
this is excellent. Cameron, let me tell you why you can't bite by that 6-year-old, because I love this analogy. The 6-year-old's brain is not attaching negative thoughts to the plane bouncing up and down. As far as the 6-year-old is concerned, this is exciting. That's why they're not panicking. And so the reason why in the history of telling yourself to calm down, you have never been able to calm down is because you are dealing with an automatic response in your body. So let's go back to the science. When you get into a situation that makes you nervous, or that makes you stressed out, or makes you afraid, or that makes you excited, those are states in your body of high agitation. Those are states of alertness. Those are states when your blood starts pumping and your brain starts paying attention and, you know, everything kind of aligns because you're about to do something that makes you excited or fun or nervous or afraid. And so you go into a state of being hyper alert. That state of high agitation is one that you can't calm down like that. So what we're doing when we teach you to create a confidence anchor and to use excitement to reframe what you're feeling is we're taking a state of high agitation from the negative to a state of high agitation in the positive. We're actually using the automatic response in our body to our advantage, and we're just tricking our brain to believe that we're actually excited because our brain doesn't know the difference. Your brain is like the 6-year-old. Your brain actually doesn't know the difference between excitement and fear. That baby that's bouncing is feeling the heart racing and then the bubbles in her stomach. It's just that your brain is framing it in the negative. Because your brain knows that excitement and that fear feels the same, that Lumineers, that meeting the Lumineers and being on an airplane feels the same. You can use that to your advantage and trick your brain in a moment where you would normally be nervous to actually think you're excited. And the reason why this matters, Cameron, is because when you're on that plane, if you can come back over and over and over to your confidence anchor, and if you can close your eyes in a moment of turbulence, and you can imagine your sister, and you can start to say out loud, and this is important, you've got to say to yourself, I'm so excited to see. What's your sister's name?
Sienna.
I am so excited to see Sienna. I'm so excited to see Sienna. I cannot wait for Sienna to hug my mom. I cannot wait for this. If you come back to that confidence anchor, you are going to flip your brain into believing that you're excited about that moment and you will no longer be afraid. And it's a way to gain control. And you know what? You want to know something really cool? Because your confidence anchor is related to what you're doing, it's really believable. Because when you are there hugging your sister, it means the plane made it and there's nothing to be worried about. That's why this works. When you imagine before a test, yourself walking out of there going, yes, it actually makes you excited to take it. When you imagine yourself nailing the interview, it makes you excited to walk into it because your brain doesn't know the difference between a state of fear or a state of excitement. And now you know a simple trick backed by research from Harvard, to take control of your mind and take control in situations where nerves normally derail you.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that was always like in the back of my head during our conversation was if I'm still, I feel fear in a lot of different areas of my life, not when I'm just in the air. So when I'm on the ground, how can I use this tool to ground myself, even if I'm not sure the outcome of it?
I love this. Okay, great question. I want you to take out a notebook and you're going to write down any single thing that makes you nervous. Could be anything. I mean, what? Give me a couple.
There's a long list probably, but off the top of my head, like something that, I don't know, I really wish that I could beat the fear on is I recently moved, not that far, but there's a really nice yoga studio on my street that I like pass every day. And I just always think like I need to be a part of a community of 20 somethings that are like-minded, that, you know, I've always loved yoga. I've loved the community it brings. But I cannot bring myself to sign up, and I can't bring myself up. Like I just constantly think about the day I have to show up for my first class, and it makes me way too anxious to even like go.
This is an excellent example. And by the way, incredibly common and very relatable.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you shared it. So you're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to create a confidence anchor. Because what I hear is I hear you want to do it. I hear it pulling you. And the nerves are keeping you back. So name something you're excited about. So like, can you pick like a coffee shop in your neighborhood that you love to go to and it's going to be your treat to get a nice latte when you're done?
Yep. Do you want me to name it?
Yeah, I do.
It's called Thinking Cup.
I love Thinking Cup. Now, you're going to close your eyes. What color yoga tights are you wearing?
Oh, God. Maybe like, I have this really nice light blue ones that I always like to wear.
I love it. And as a treat, because you went to this relaxing yoga class in your light blue tights, sweatshirt tied around your waist, yoga bag over your shoulder, standing at Thinking Cup. What did you order?
Probably like an iced oat milk latte.
Love it. Love it. How do you feel?
Yeah.
As you're walking out of the Thinking Cup, having just completed that class and treating yourself to that, how do you feel right now?
Like proud of myself for doing it.
Awesome. There's your confidence anchor. Anytime you feel nervous, you're going to count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, to interrupt the nerves and create that starting ritual, and you're going to drop that confidence anchor. And what's going to happen is it's going to slowly retrain your mind that you're not nervous about joining that yoga studio. You're actually excited. And when you start to practice this confidence anchor, at some point you're going to find yourself walking down the street and there's the studio. And as that wave, because remember, it's automatic. Anxiety. Let me talk to you about anxiety. So first of all, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Mel Robbins, and you're meeting me as a international best-selling author and a very, very prolific partner of Audibles. But I struggle with anxiety for 2 decades. I have 3 kids, 2 of them with pretty significant issues with anxiety, thanks to me, because it can be genetic. Anxiety is nothing more than a system, an alarm system in your body. Okay, that's all that anxiety is. Anxiety has a purpose. Anxiety's purpose is to warn you that there's something up. Okay, now anxiety can be a really good thing in certain situations. So for example, have any of you ever been in a situation where you're either about to cross the street or you're driving in a car and all of a sudden out of nowhere, oh my God, I didn't see it, like a car swerves, or you almost pull into somebody's lane, or you almost step into traffic. Have you had that experience happen? Yes, you see all the hearts. Everyone's like, of course. Well, that flood that you feel in your body, that's anxiety. That's all. It's just your body's hardwired to go like, warning, 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 before your mind even realizes what's going on. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you're in a car and all of a sudden you're about to hit another car and you swerve out of the way, the second that the threat is over, your body settles down, because your mind can look around and go, the threat is gone. We can all just calm down now. The issue, if you're feeling a lot of anxiety right now, is that all the uncertainty, whether it's about the pandemic or the economy or the election or the fight for social justice, or whether or not you're going to keep your job, or whether or not the person that you're living with is going to come home angry and start fighting with you, like all of those things that create uncertainty, they create a constant feeling in your body that something's up. And the way that your mind and your body work together is that the second that the anxiety signal goes up in your body, something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong, your mind starts to look for reasons that can explain it. Because in the example I gave you of the car, when you see the car go away, your mind tells your body you can calm down. What's happened for everybody on the planet right now is, ever since COVID-19 hit, people have been living with a heightened state of anxiety that's never gone down. And so what you need to do, and I talk about it in detail in on almost every single project I've ever done for Audible, frankly. But what you need to do is what I was saying in the very beginning. You need to do some work every day to just keep your nervous system settling down. That's number one. And number two, you need to start to understand what are the things that are triggering your anxiety. You need to write those triggers down. And then you need to come up with what I call anchor thoughts, which are ways to turn the alarm off. And anchor thoughts are your go-to thoughts that you're going to think in any situation where your anxiety is triggered. You see the, maybe there's a presidential debate tonight. Maybe that's making you anxious. I have no idea. And so your mind starts to spiral, right? When you think about the election, you think about what's happening, you think about the vitriol in this country, whatever. You could come up with a thought pattern that no matter what happens, this country will get through it. No matter what happens, we're going to get through it. No matter what happens, like you could say something in your mind that then lowers the tension, okay? Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed that video, by God, please subscribe, because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. We've got so much amazing stuff coming. Thank you so much for sending this stuff to your friends and your family. I love you. We create these videos for you. So make sure you subscribe. Mwah.